The neon sign above Dusty's diner flickered like a dying star, casting jagged shadows across the cracked asphalt of Route 66. Inside, 17-year-old Ellie Harper sat alone in a corner booth, her work-worn hands cradling a chipped mug of coffee that had gone cold. Her oversized flannel patched at the elbows hung loose over her broad frame, and her auburn braid, dusted with hay from the morning's chores, rested heavy on her shoulder. Ellie wasn't here for the greasy burgers or the pie with its questionable expiration date. She was here because this run-down diner in the heart of Redfield, Oklahoma, was her only refuge from the whispers that haunted her. School, church, the feed store, fat farm girl. They sneered, the words as sharp as barbed wire. Tonight, those whispers were about to ignite into something far crueler. Hey, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming. It's a story that'll grip you to the core. Ellie's hazel eyes traced the steam curling from her coffee, but her ears caught the Snickers slicing through the diner's hum. Across the room, 3 seniors from Redfield High sprawled in a booth by the jukebox. Their Letterman jackets slung carelessly over their chairs. Bryce Tanner, the quarterback, with a smile like a snake, leaned back, his eyes glinting with malice. His buddies Jake and Cody fed off his energy, their laughter sharp and practiced. Ellie knew the game. It had started in middle school when her body began to fill out and her family's farm began to crumble under debt. She was an easy target, big, quiet, always alone. But tonight, their cruelty had an edge. Fueled by the cheap beer they'd snuck in their truck, or maybe just the restless venom of small-town boredom. The air in the diner thickened like the moment before a twister touches down. Bryce slid out of his booth, his boots scuffing the grimy linoleum as he sauntered toward Ellie. The diner was half dead. A trucker hunched over his meatloaf at the counter. An old couple picking at their fries in the corner, too lost in their own world to notice the storm brewing. Hey, Ellie. Bryce drawled, his voice syrupy with mock charm. You eating for 2 now? Or is that just your face's natural shape? Jake and Cody howled, slapping the table, their laughter echoing off the diner's peeling walls. Ellie's grip tightened on her mug, her knuckles whitening, but she kept her eyes down. She'd learned long ago that fighting back only sharpened their claws. Still, her cheeks burned and her heart pounded so loud she swore they could hear it. Bryce leaned closer, his onion-laced breath hot on her face. What's the matter, pig girl? Too busy shoveling slop to talk. Margie, the waitress, with a smoker's rasp and tired eyes, shot Ellie a fleeting look of pity, but didn't step in. Nobody ever did in Redfield. Small towns had a way of looking the other way, especially when it came to kids like Bryce, whose dad owned half the auto shops in town. Ellie's jaw clenched, her eyes flicking up to meet Bryce's for a split second. That was her mistake. He saw the spark of defiance, and it lit something ugly in him. He snatched her mug, sloshing coffee across the table, and dumped it into the plastic plant beside her booth, its leaves curling from years of neglect. Oops, he said, his grin sharp as a blade. Gus, you don't need more calories anyway. Jake grabbed a ketchup bottle and squirted it onto Ellie's lap, the red stain blooming across her faded jeans like a wound. Cody yanked her braid hard enough to make her gasp, his fingers twisting the strands with a cruel tug. The trucker glanced up, then back down at his plate. Margie muttered about calling the manager, her voice barely audible over the jukebox's twang, but she stayed rooted behind the counter. Ellie's hands trembled as she stood, her 5'10" frame towering over Bryce, though she hunched to make herself smaller, a habit carved from years of trying to disappear. Leave me alone, she said, her voice low but steady, cutting through the diner's hum. Bryce laughed, stepping so close she could smell the nicotine on his breath. Or what, Ellie, you going to cry to your daddy? Oh, wait, nobody's seen him in years. Probably ran off when he saw how you turned out. The words hit harder than the ketchup, deeper than the tug on her braid. Ellie's father, Amos Harper, had been gone for months, taking contract jobs out of state to keep their struggling farm from foreclosure. Or so he told her. The truth was Ellie didn't know where he was. Didn't know if he'd ever come back. Her mom had died when she was 6. A car accident that left only a faded photo on the mantle and a hole in their lives. Ellie had grown up fast, cooking, cleaning, and baling hay while her classmates planned homecoming dances. But the names, the stares, the endless jabs about her weight. They chipped away at her in ways the farm's endless chores never could. She pushed past Bryce, her shoulder brushing his chest, and shoved through the diner's glass door, the bell jangling like a warning. The cool September night swallowed her as she climbed into her dad's rusted Ford pickup. The engine coughing to life. Their L chased her sharp and relentless as she peeled out of the lot, her hands gripping the wheel so tight her knuckles gleamed white under the street lights. The road stretched dark and endless, leading to the Harper farm. 40 acres of struggling corn and soybeans, a sagging farmhouse and a barn that creaked in the wind. Ellie's chest ached not peerless aces tanned not with tears but with a fire that burned deep. She didn't cry. She never did. But inside something was splintering. Back at the diner, Bryce and his friends were high on their own cruelty, tossing fries and plotting their next move. They didn't notice the man in the shadowed booth by the window. His face half hidden under a worn baseball cap. He'd been there the whole time, nursing a glass of water, his cold hand still as stone. Amos Harper, 42, lean and weathered with gray eyes like storm clouds, had seen things most men couldn't fathom. Deserts in Iraq, jungles in nameless places, blood on his hands that never washed clean. A Marine sniper for 12 years. They'd called him Reaper for his precision and the cold fury he unleashed when cornered. He'd left that life when Ellie was born, trading his rifle for a plow. But the farm was a money pit, and the only way to save it was contract work, security gigs in places as dangerous as his past. He'd come back to Redfield unannounced, his duffel bag stuffed with cash to fix the tractor, and maybe mend the distance between him and his daughter. He'd walked into the diner 20 minutes ago, planning to surprise Ellie. Instead, he'd watched 3 punks tear her apart. Every word, every laugh, every drop of ketchup seared into him like shrapnel. Amos didn't move, didn't speak. His pulse was steady, his mind cold and clear. A skill honed in battles far from this dusty town. He'd learned to wait for the right moment. It was coming. Amos' past wasn't just a shadow, it was a weight. In the Marines, he'd been a ghost, slipping through enemy lines, his scope finding targets a mile away. He'd saved lives and taken them, each shot etching a line in his soul. When Ellie's mother, Sarah, died in that wreck, Amos buried his medals in a tin box and swore he'd never kill again. But the farm inherited from Sarah's family was a relentless beast, droughts, debts, and broken equipment. He took the contract jobs to keep it afloat, each trip pulling him further from Ellie. She was 12, the first time he left for months. Her small face pressed against the window as he drove away. Now at 17, she was a stranger to him, strong and stubborn like her mother, but carrying wounds he hadn't seen until tonight. The guilt was a knife in his gut, sharper than Bryce's words. Ellie drove home, the pickup's headlights slicing through the Oklahoma night. The farm was 10 miles out, a patchwork of fields and fences her family had worked for 3 generations. She parked by the barn, the engine ticking as it cooled, and stared at the dark house. It was too quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against her chest. Her mom's absence was a ghost in every room. The kitchen where they'd baked cornbread, the porch where she'd sung lullabies. Ellie had learned to be tough, to lift bales heavier than herself, to drive a tractor at 13. But toughness didn't stop the itchy of being the girl nobody wanted at the dance. The one whose size made her invisible or a target. She climbed out, her boots crunching gravel, and trudged inside, the ketchup-stained jeans clinging to her thighs. On the couch, she sank into the worn cushions, the silence deafening. She imagined her dad's voice deep and steady, filling the void. She didn't know he was already on his way. Amos paid his tab, his movements precise, like assembling a weapon. He didn't glance at Bryce's table, but he'd memorized every detail. Their faces, their voices, the way they moved like predators who'd never been hunted. His black Chevy Silverado roared to life. A truck as battered as his soul, and he followed the road to the farm. Rage and guilt churned inside him. Rage at the boy's guilt for failing Ellie. He'd missed her first day of high school, her 16th birthday, the day she won the county fair's tractor pull. He'd promised to be there, but the farm always came first. Not tonight. He gripped the wheel, his scarred knuckles tight, the Oklahoma plains blurring past. The diner scene replayed in his mind. Ellie's hunched shoulders, her trembling hands, the way she didn't fight back. He'd taught her to be strong, but he hadn't taught her how to face wolves like Bryce. At the farm, Ellie sat in the dark, the house creaking around her. Headlights swept through the windows and her heart lurched. Bryce and his crew come to finish what they started. She stood, fists clenched, ready to fight. The door opened and Amos stepped into the dim light of the living room, his silhouette broad and unheeded, system unyielding. Dead. Ellie's voice cracked, her eyes wide with disbelief. Amos's face was a mask of strain, his jaw tight, his gray eyes, her eyes burning with something she hadn't seen in years. I saw what happened, he said, his voice low like the rumble of distant thunder. At the diner, Ellie's breath caught, relief, shame, and fear collided in her chest. She'd spent years building walls around her heart, hiding the pain of her father's absences, the town's cruelty. Now he'd seen her at her lowest, humiliated in front of strangers. It's fine, she lied, her voice barely a whisper. They're just jerks. Amos stepped closer, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor. It's not fine, he said, the words sharp as a blade. Nobody touches my daughter, nobody. His eyes held hers, and she saw something new. Guilt, raw, and deep, mixed with a fury that made her shiver. Dade, please, she said, grabbing his arm, her fingers digging into the corded muscle beneath his sleeve. Don't do anything stupid. He looked down at her hand, then at her face, and something softened in his expression, but only for a moment. I'm not going to do anything stupid, he said. I'm going to do what's right. Ellie's heart pounded as he pulled free and headed for the door. She followed him onto the porch, the night air cool against her flushed skin. Dad, stop, she called, her voice stronger now, edged with desperation. Amos turned, his silhouette framed by the moonlight, and for the first time she saw the weight he carried. Years of war, loss and sacrifice etched into his weathered face. Ellie, he said, his voice softer but firm. I've been gone too long. I let this happen to you. No more. She stepped forward, her boots crunching on the gravel, tears burning her eyes. You can't fix this with a fight. You'll get arrested and then what? I'll lose you, too. Her voice broke and Amos' face twitched, the guilt hitting him harder than any punch. He closed the distance between them, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You won't lose me, he said. But those boys crossed a line. They need to learn what happens when they do. Ellie shook her head, her braids swinging. I don't need you to fight my battles. I need you here. The words hung between them, raw and heavy. Amos pulled her into a hug, his arms strong and warm. And for a moment, she was a little girl again, safe in her father's embrace. But when he pulled back, his eyes were still. I'm here now, he said. And I'm not letting this go. He climbed into his truck, the engine roaring, and drove into the night. Ellie stood frozen, the taillights fading, her heart torn between fear and a strange, fierce pride. Her dad was back, and whatever came next, Redfield would never be the same. The next morning, the town was alive with gossip. Bryce, Jake, and Cody's trucks were found outside the diner. Tires slashed, windows cracked, and cod spray painted in red across the hoods. No witnesses, no proof, but the message was clear. The boys were rattled, their bravado shattered, whispering nervously in the school halls. Ellie heard the rumors at school. Some blamed a rival team, others a drifter. She saw the red paint flecks on Amos' boots that night and said nothing, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and awe. Amos sat at the kitchen table, cleaning his hunting rifle with a calm that chilled her. "Don't worry," he said without looking up. "Nobody saw me." Ellie swallowed, her voice steady. "You didn't have to do that." Amos' hands paused, his eyes meeting hers. "Yes, I did." The weight of his words settled over her, a promise and a warning. Amos wasn't finished. He'd spent the day working his old contacts. A cop who owed him a favor. A mechanic with a grudge. A hacker from his Marine days who could dig up dirt faster than a backhoe. Bryce Tanner's life was an open book now. His dad's DUI arrests, his mom's casino debts, his shaky scholarship. Amos didn't want to scare Bryce. He wanted to dismantle him. Every secret, every weakness was a weapon. And Amos wielded them with surgical precision. He sat in his truck at night watching the town, his mind mapping the next move. The farm, Ellie, his own fractured soul. They were all at stake. He'd lost too much to lose her, too. Friday night's football game was Redfield's pride. The stands packed with locals under the blazing stadium lights. Bryce, the star quarterback, strutted onto the field, his grin cocky despite the whispers. Ellie stayed home avoiding the crowds, but Amos was there high in the bleachers, his cap low, his eyes locked on Bryce. The game hummed along, the crowd roaring until the third quarter when the scoreboard flickered. A video appeared. Grainy diner footage of Bryce, Jake, and Cody harassing Ellie, the ketchup splashing, her braid yanked, her face stoic, but breaking. The crowd gasped, then fell silent as the video cut to Bryce's truck. The boys pouring beer into cups, underage drinking in plain sight. Booze erupted, parents shouting, kids whispering. Bryce stood frozen on the field, his helmet dangling, his kingdom crumbling. Amos watched, his face a mask. He'd paid his hacker friend a fortune for the footage, spliced with his own hidden camera from the diner lot. It was a risk, hacking, vandalism, vigilante justice. But Amos didn't care. This was for Ellie. The crowd's outrage grew and Bryce's teammates turned away, leaving him alone on the grass. Ammo slipped out unnoticed, his mission complete. By Monday, Bryce's world was ashes. His scholarship was under review. His coach benched him, and his parents faced the principal's wrath. Jake and Cody ratted him out, spilling secrets to save themselves. The town turned on the golden boy, his bullying exposed. Ellie walked the halls with a new quiet strength. The whispers now about Bryce's fall. She joined the agriculture club. Her knowledge of crops and livestock earning nods from kids who'd once shunned her. At home, Amos was waiting on the porch with sweet tea, his scars catching the sunset's glow. "You okay?" he asked, his voice rough with love. Ellie leaned on his shoulder, a rare moment of softness. "I'm getting there," she said. "You're back. That's enough for now." Amos's arm tightened around her, his eyes on the fields, a silent vow to never leave again. The farm glowed gold in the dusk, its struggles fading in the light of their reunion. Ellie wasn't just the fat farm girl anymore. She was Ellie Harper, strong as the land she worked, her father's daughter. Bryce and his crew had underestimated her, and they'd paid the price for crossing a man like Amos. The town would talk for years, but the Harpers were done hiding. Thanks for watching this epic story. It hits deep, right? Drop a comment and tell me from which part of the country are you watching this video. Let's see where this tale's landing.